Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to another Supercoach Insider podcast. My name is Swiz, here to talk all things round 21 with my team. It's Friday afternoon, teams are out, and we're only a few hours away from the first bounce of the Bulldogs Richmond. But before we get into how that's going to look for my side and everything else related to round 21, check us out on all our social media platforms, SoundCloud, YouTube, Spotify, and in particular, if you want to get in contact with us, Twitter, Supercoach Insider 100 and Swiz 26. Well, actually, I shouldn't even say Twitter anymore. It should be X, I think it is. But yes, that is still the best way to contact us. And as always, thank you to all the fans and our sponsor, Splash Vodka, for the ongoing support of this podcast. Disappointingly, we haven't caught up, Ben, myself, and Chris for a couple of weeks now. As I said, Ben's been pretty snowed under, but Chris is going to be down in Melbourne. We will be recording our Fancast AFL podcast together. So when that's out, check that out and any of the other episodes. I know our producer Dave's been doing a ton of work just putting out segments. So if there's things you want us to discuss or us to bring up, yeah, feel free. And I think the Dr. Supercoach boys have their get-together this week. So Chris will be there. We'll be around at a couple of footy matches, Bulldogs and Richmond, potentially Hawthorn, Collingwood, Essendon, West Coast. So we'll be fighting around Melbourne together. So yeah, if you're a footy fan and at these games, or if you're at any of them, feel free to hit us up. I know I got hit up by a couple of people last week in Ballarat, which was great. Awesome to see the local community come out and support that game. And it was, apart from the fact if you're a Bulldog supporter, fantastic finish. Toby Green just absolutely dominated there. So for me, but in round 20, Supercoach 2606, looking great up until Saturday evening and Sunday, as is always the case. Had my VC on Stewart. Unfortunately, the 101, 51 and half quarter time it was, but his performance, much like the Cats after that, went downhill. I didn't go Tim English, mainly for the reason that the conditions at Ballarat just did not seem to suit. It was extremely windy out there, and we were talking about how it's going to be difficult for Key to tools just to mark the ball. Well, it was for the Giants' Keys, but not so much for Tim English, who just dominated in the air all day. He's just better and better each and every week, and his price is now up to $725,000, which is just ridiculous. He's very quickly becoming first pick for a lot of people next year, but his price is going to be something really large. So it will be interesting to see how many people will go there, but we know just how good of a football he's come. And the biggest concerns we all had was the injury and the concussions, but touch wood, doesn't seem to be worrying him at the moment. And I have put the VC on him. Probably should have just left it there for the last month because, yeah, he has been dominating. And then my captain, I end up having Sicily. I had Neil for the 87, but took it off. I had Grimo when we were at the footy say, no, get on Neil. I mean, get on Sicily, but there was only 102. So there was a few other better options in my team. And again, just costing myself points. So I ended up dropping about 80 spots in ranking, which was disappointing. And the only other decision I probably had was Wines versus Mills, and I went Mills over Wines. It cost me 22 points. So if I'd gone English and got Mills, that's 80 points. And I think there's one of the leagues I'm in where somebody is ranked 80 points higher than me, and he's about 660. So could have moved up about 150 spots, but instead it dropped back 80. And it's probably as close as, so close it is. When you've got 80, 100 points, and that's the difference between 300 ranking points. So I still think top 500 could happen, but over these last 4 weeks, I really needed a late, somebody pulling out late. In particular, Marshall would be the real bonus, but even if it's just anybody, and that's how I've set my team up. In a perfect world, like your Mills and Wines and that, it's just not working out compared to maybe having Libber out there and Petrarca, who are just going massive. The other one is, that last trade, bringing in Nick Martin, who's been really poor the last couple of weeks, hoping he repays the faith with West Coast and North Melbourne over the next fortnight. And he's sort of a loophole guy, which is giving me some flexibility. But it would have been so much better maybe just using that last trade on Briggs, who's, doing really well, still scoring his 100 and 110 each week. But Max Gorn and those people who did pull the trigger there, absolutely getting rewarded every week. What was it, 173 last week? He's had the 200 game. It just looks an absolute class above. And to think that Gorn, he actually probably was in the big hand of Richmond's first 3 goals. So he's one of the poorest people on the ground in the first probably 10 minutes last Sunday. And then from there just went berserk, especially in that second half. So could do the exact same this week against North. if, it's one of those hindsight things, especially with people who traded out Gawn. You see Grundy get dropped, and then he has just gone to the next level. But we've seen this with the rucks anyway. They usually finish strong, but your English and Gawn are just going through the roof, and then some of those key midfielders in Petrarca and Libba. And I do feel sorry for other people because there has been some value that people have been trying to get in. I was talking to one person, shout out to Tim, who put his hand up and said, I think he's in 3 weeks. Actually, he was just messaging me before. His last 3 trades in were Sean Darcy, Walsh and Took. So every time he trades somebody in, they get injured out the next week. So that's just so brutal, especially when you've got pods. And it's hard. Like, we can kind of stay with the grain and keep your sort of ranking points, but you're trying to go those pods to move up on rankings. The only problem is the highly owned players are just continuing to perform each week. Petrarca's second half again, he's been fantastic. So yeah, it's not only there's just no way to really make ground. So we're seeing like the top performers are just continuing to set the pace each week, which good on them. They did the hard yards early, made the right decisions to get the ranking that they did. But you want people to still able to pull out a couple, like we had last year with like Himmelberg, Darcy Cameron, who's repaid a bit of the faith last week with the 127. But those sort of players last week, which people who'd taken the risk on them really boosted us forward. It just hasn't shaped out that way this year. But there's still 4 weeks left. Anything can happen. So not having any trades, there's not a lot I can do from that point of view, as I say each week, but it's just on the loophole. So Chester's really the only one who can loophole in defence there, and that's only for like a quarter because the Suns game starts, I think, half an hour after the Adelaide game. So the West Coast game starts half an hour before the Suns game. So I don't think Chester's going to do anything brilliant in those half an hour, but just for the slight chance that Chester, for whatever reason, goes to quarter time with 40 points, we'll just chuck the emergency on him. The big one is I've moved Nick Dacos as my loophole emergency in the midfield. Now, I've got Mills on field. I'm sort of still been debating between Mills and Wines, but I'm backing Mills to rebound after last week's very poor performance against the Bombers. Wines was all right, but then down against Geelong, as much as Geelong have been gettable for some teams, and we saw that what Freo did on them last week. I'm expecting Geelong to rebound strong this week, so Wines can get benched. I'll back Mills in. But Roberts is on field at the moment and most likely take Dacos to score. However, the Hawks have come out and said McGuinness will definitely go to Dacos. He did it in the preseason, did a really good job on him. He's probably the best tagger in the league at the moment. There's not too many others that just do a full-on lockdown. So that's how I'm hoping to get points if Dacos does have a bad game, and it was to finally only score a 50, 60, 70. And then I was managed to able to chuck more. Now, I don't think Wine's going to go too much more than that, but there's potential for me to get some points there if he was to have a bad game. And then if Dacos goes well anyway, Roberts just stays on field and nothing gets affected there anyway. Timmy English, as I said, is the VC. Captain at the moment is Merritt, and I find it hard to see that changing. Playing West Coast, the Bombers need to win strong and win, to build that percentage back up. So I'm just going to back the Essendon skipper to lead from the front there. And then in the forward line, again, I've got Taranto with the emergency on. So Taranto's had a bit of a poor form lately, hoping that he can rebound, not just obviously from a Richmond point of view, but from a Supercoach point of view. Actually did see a couple last week, I think. I even have to give a shout out to my other half here because she scored nearly 2,700 and lost with one of the biggest pods. I think the only pod she had on Sunday was Taranto versus Sheasel, and what did Sheasel go, like 115? So yeah, I think she ended up losing by about 40 points, which is brutal. Imagine you got people scoring 2,700 last week and still losing. So Taranto, in case he has another poor game, and we know how good that Bulldogs midfield is, he can be my loophole, and I'll back Martin in. If Taranto goes well, then Martin will swap with Bennett's. And I'll take Taranto score, and then Martin can go up in that midfield. And then I'll probably play then Martin over Mills. Almost Dacos I'll probably just go Martin straight over Mills, and then I'll worry about the Mills versus Wines if Dacos was poor, because I'll back Martin to rebound this week. I think, this game's set up. It is against West Coast, and West Coast have been really strong at home, but been pretty poor away. It'd be interesting to see how West Coast kind of respond to. Like, it's a big percentage gap, 17% to North Melbourne, and we know no team. Well, I can't say no team ever goes out to tank, because I was at that Richmond-Melbourne game where I think that's the one obvious game I ever saw which tanking was involved. Not maybe from the players, but from the coaching staff. But yeah, like, I think if North Melbourne get absolutely trounced by Melbourne, which I think is a big possibility this week, because the D's want to try to make sure, and I don't know it's only 1%, but have a clear gap of percentage against Brisbane, as they are trying to chase still a top 2 spot. I think Melbourne could do a real number on North, and it'd be interesting if West Coast have a respectable loss against the Bombers. That percentage gap of 17 could close very quickly over 4 weeks. So, it'd be interesting to see how that plays out. But I'm hoping with the Bombers needing to win big with a percentage of 98, Nick Martin and Merritt lead the charge there. So that's just kind of a bit of food for thought. Most people this week, it doesn't seem to be, again, a lot of trading happening. I don't know why a few people are trading out Neil. That just seems ridiculous. But Mills, Marriage seem to be the two that are the most traded out, and then Tuke Miller for those people who brought him in, unfortunately. So the popular ones, definitely, again, Merritt and Darcy Parish, if you don't have either of them, especially with their fixture over the next couple of weeks, and they've just got to keep on winning. If you're looking for a cheaper forward ruck or either one of those positions, Luke Jackson with Darcy out does give some value. He's 464. For Tuke owners, Josh Kelly at 512 hasn't been in the greatest form, but with the Giants in 6, and they just got to continue to win and do their thing. Potentially could be looking at a home final if they keep winning. Massive game for them with that battle of the bridge against the Swannies. So he's not a bad one, because we know. Though Kelly does put in a lot of games at that sort of 90 to 105 range, he's always good for one real massive score. And with Supercoach finals starting this week, he's a bit of a left field there to go. He's not going to be highly owned. It's and as that sort of matchup, a big boost that you could get, because you're looking for pods for those people who are playing league finals this week. He could be a good shout. So if you are league finals too, have a little bit of look at your matchups and see where if you're going to make a trade, or if you can loophole a player, where's the difference where you can really get someone. So for me, I think I'm in finals for every one of my leagues, which is good. So if I'm looking at probably my main one, especially it's my elimination finals. Like, there's a couple of leagues where I'm sitting 5th spot, so I'm looking up against 7th and 8th, depending on where if I'm finished 5th or 6th. But this one in particular, so having a look at their team, the real difference with them, they've got that sort of Sheasel, Himmelberg decision there, but most of the rest of the side, it's similar. Like, I'm looking at the fact that they've got Mills. So the harder thing for me is because I'm in 10 leagues. So if you're in multiple leagues, it does make it harder to sort of set up how you're going to. But you get a real good look at on today's game, and then even maybe the Saturday game, to see how you're tracking against your opponent. If you look like you've got the stronger team, like this team I'm looking at right now, they've got Chera and Walsh out. So if they've got trades, and I'm going to know about that pretty quickly, that they swap them, then a bit of a different story. But if they don't have the trades and they can't trade out of them, then I know that I'm going to win that league matchup. And if I was in the situation where I had a trade, you could potentially hold that. And that's probably the biggest questions we're getting through, is people going, okay, I've got 1 trade left or 2 trades left. Do I go with it this week? And that's probably the advice I'm looking at, is if you're inside that sort of top 500, maybe you go all in to try to get higher up the rankings. If you're playing for leagues and you have a big chance of winning this week, just hold on, because you're going to rather want that trade in a do or die semi-final or prelim matchup. Where, if you're in that position where you look like losing this week, and even if you can hold your trade to as long as possible. So depending on who you're trading out. So as I said, a lot of people are looking at maybe that Mills type, if they're going to burn a luxury trade. So if you can potentially look at getting like a Melbourne player, Freo, St Kilda on the Sunday, So you might go, say, trade Mills out before his game, effectively, depending on what cash to somebody in that game. And then you can always, retrade, update your trade on the Sunday, depending on how you're feeling. Or even if you're, you to have a look at how you're going after the Hawthorn-Collingwood game. Now, that doesn't leave you a lot of time. But if you're in these positions, if you're somebody who's got a Mills or a Wines, you can have a look, get a good idea of your projections, have a look how many players that are different to your opponent. So you might by then only have 2 or 3 people who are different. You might have a 50 or 100-point lead. And then if that's the case, then you can hold that player and potentially then look at moving them on next week. So every team's in a different situation. But yeah, obviously you've played Supercoach for this many rounds, and for a lot of people in 20-team leagues, it's 19 rounds of head-to-head matchups, and now we get to round 21. You don't want to undo all your hard work for one bad trade when you're going to go win or and just give up your whole season because of that mistake. So tonight, good options if you don't have Tim English, Bont, VC as well, but also try to have a look at maybe what your opponent's going to do and see what potential VCs that they've got. And if you are again looking at scoring well and you've got a captain choice, maybe if you've got a Petrarca or you can captain somebody on the Sunday, Neil, hold off. And then you can sort of make a judgment call if you need to roll the dice, because the captain's the one, if you get a situation where you're behind and you've still got your captain up to play, well, there's nothing wrong with rolling the dice on somebody who can potentially go large. And if you're going to, for example, Sicily's not a great one this week because it's Saturday, but maybe Luke Ryan, for example, at home. So if you got to the Sunday and you haven't used your captain yet, and you might be 50 points behind, and you need somebody who might be able to pump up at 150 or 160, maybe taking a risk on somebody like him, because if you go safe, well, you're going to lose anyway. So yeah, that's where we get messages about some of these questions about risky calls, and definitely some food for thought there. In regards to anything else, naturally your draft leagues, especially, it doesn't matter even if it's keeper or standard, but forwards are the one position everyone continues to streamline. Have a look at the Bombers forwards this week. And Archie Perkins, Jake String has been in such poor form recently, and even a couple of those Bombers, like they've dropped Snelling. So that probably opens up around their small forwards. So who do the Bombers down there? And actually, where we got here, so they've got no stringer. They've got no. I'm just looking up their forward line here. Snelling's out, so it's literally Langford, Wright, Perkins, and then they've named the 2 young fellas in Hobbs and Sardis. So potentially, if you've got one of those Bombers or 2 of those Bombers on your waiver line, go out and grab one of them this week, because one of them could easily get on hold of a 15 possession, 20 possession game and kick 2 or 3 goals, especially if the Bombers are to kind of feast on them. The other one is the D's against North, and it's it's low hanging fruit with a couple of these sides. Chandler, he's been bobbing up and having some good games up there. James Jordan continues to pop up in teams. Even Melshcombe, you look at what he did last week in Petty against the Tigers. So can these sort of guys back it up for another week? But you look at Petty, went 135. Neil Bullen an 87. Van Rooyen 82. So if you're looking for a draft forward, and you've got guys who have only been sort of averaging 60 and 70, which is quite possible with depending on how deep your league goes. Yeah, just have a little flick through a couple of those guys, have a look at your waivers and think, okay, who potentially here could just get hold of a bit of a bag with a couple of these weaker matchups this week. So Collingwood even on the rebound, that could be a real interesting game against the Hawks. It would not surprise me if a couple of those Collingwood guys try to, it's always the case. Bobby Hill, after he missed last week, might be a nice little one that he's freshened up in the forward line. And even I think I've seen Daniel McStay on a few waivers, which he was always very solid for a 70 at the Lions. And even he's not a bad one for your draft stars this week. He's most likely to probably get the Sicily matchup. But if him or like I wouldn't be surprised if probably Sicily goes to Myercheck and, he tries to get off and zone off there and takes his intercept marks. So McStay can get up into the ruck, and without Mason Cox playing this week, they're going to be looking at Ash Johnson and McStay to come out and do that chop out. So I could see definitely McStay in formats, both draft Supercoach and your draft stars, to get a lot more points than what he's probably been, getting back since he's come back from injury. So there's just a couple of left field players to think about that hopefully will help you either win cash in those draft stars or your draft league. Outside of that, there's not a lot more to talk about. Continue to support our podcast. Check out the Fancast AFL. I should spit that out right. And hopefully everybody has a great week super coaching. Bye.